the message and songs, but mostly, Lord, for the message from your word. We're thankful for the truth that just reach out to us and they grab us. The wisdom cries out into our lives, into our hearts, Lord. I pray we're listening. I pray we respond to where you impart wisdom to our lives. Lord, wisdom from the lives of those that have gone before in the Old Testament, Lord. Decisions made, consequences encountered. Lord, blessings achieved and heights of joy that were reached in doing things your way. We pray, Lord, that we would see these things from your truth, these messages, these true stories, Lord, that come from your word. And we pray, Lord, that these aren't things we just treat as fairy tales, things we enjoy listening to. Lord, we treat these and understand that these are things that are guiding our life and that we would respond to you. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Now, Jacob did say, at 130 years old, he hadn't lived as long as his fathers, when he was young.
130.
So, yeah, he was young.
Oh, I'm sorry I didn't put the PowerPoint. I see TJ walking up.
Look at that lovely prayer about how you wanted the message to go on. Put the power on.
It was one of those things, I'll put in a comment, I'll say, that's why you need to come to church.
Yeah, fill in on it there. All right. All right.
Was that recorded?
That was recorded. You can't get fired till Friday, though, so don't worry about it. All right. Good morning. Howdy. We are on lesson number 5, Bad Counsel Causes Division. I thought it was fitting on the song, Careless Soul. I know it's kind of directed to someone that's lost, but also for us, isn't it not? As a child of God, careless soul. When we make those wrong decisions, exactly what our lesson is about today. So, when you guys started on this lesson, you got reading different things through this here, did you think, okay, this is Solomon just messed up, God spoke to him, then his son really messed up, and this caused everything division? Well, I can kind of honestly say, well, yeah, we see how this goes, but then when you get into it and you say, wow, what we're just witnessing here and what we're studying here today, it's a monumental point in the Hebrew history that takes place. Now, Rehoboam, yeah, he was a young whippersnapper, spoiled rotten. He takes a lot of blame for this, and rightly so. But when you look at the whole gist of things, let's not be so quick to point everything at Rehoboam. And I'll try to bring this out when we study this today. I'll read from the Teacher's Guide because he brings out some good things in here. It says the following study marks one of the most important parts of Israel's history. If a proper understanding is not obtained, students of the Bible will find it difficult to follow events that proceed from this point. The narrative that unfolds in 1 Kings 12 and 2 Chronicles 10 showed how the kingdom of Israel became divided. So we put this at this one point. This is where it's divided. This is where the kingdom is. And we've known this, those that have went through FBI, and we've studied the divided kingdom. You go through the books, and this is this kingdom, and this is this kingdom. This prophet wrote for here, and this prophet wrote for here, but this prophet wrote for both of them. And you say, what is going on? That's just history going. The division caused much animosity among the Jewish brethren and lasted until the return from captivity. Even though they came back together, there was not a bond that there was prior to this division. The 120 years from Saul, David, and Solomon that had been established. More so with Solomon in the prosperity, in the notoriety that was brought to Israel. It doesn't get that way anymore. A very important lesson A very important reason why all Christians should know the history of vision is because it will help them interpret prophetical books. The individual books of the Bible were written for specific audiences in mind. The prophets of God who recorded history through. Inspiration wrote with specific audience groups in mind. Some prophecies were written to the northern kingdom, while others were the southern kingdom. Additionally, there were prophecies that were written to both kingdoms. As if it were not already difficult enough, certain prophetical books and passages were addressed to Gentile nation or cities. Yes, we're still in the Old Testament. Gospel was given to the Gentiles in the Old Testament. Not only does God love Gentiles in the New Testament age, he loved them so much in the Old Testament that he used his prophets to give messages commanding their repentance. Understanding when the division took place, right now, will help in determining if a prophet was writing to the northern kingdom or the southern kingdom. The threat of Israel's division was not a secret. God warned Solomon that this was going to happen. And I say, even when you study it, as we have now, as a child of God, we have everything completed. The threat was there, and it was given to Solomon, but it was prior to this, was it not? We can see how it was established prior to this. Solomon it was going to happen. It was all brought because of his sin of idolatry. Unlike his father David, Solomon turned away from the living God to a life building high places and serving idols. God raised an adversary who would receive a portion of the kingdom that would be torn away from Solomon's son. God informed Solomon that was one of his servants. This would be Jeroboam. Once the servant was identified, Solomon wanted to kill him, which was likely to attempt to stop the plan which was unfold. But who's in charge of the plan? Is it Solomon? Is it Rehoboam? Is it David? It's God himself. Regardless of his effort, this was a prophecy that God would deliver and fulfill. There was no stopping this plan. As tragic consequences of Solomon's sinful choices, there it is, the sinful choices that God said, you're not going to see him. I'm telling you they're going to happen, but you won't see him in your life, but your son will. Kind of a somber warning for us, is it not? As a child of God, the kingdom of Israel was divided. Out of his grace, God postponed the judgment till the death of Solomon. The division occurred during the life of his son. Although postponing was brought about because Solomon was being dealt with by a gracious and merciful God, his judgment would still prevail. I'm so glad we have this, that we still serve this gracious and merciful God, and he will fulfill what he has promised to do. So that kind of gives an oversight of where we're at in history. And again, it's because of this bad decision, but it's been, as we'll get into, we'll see how it's been here for a period of time. Rehoboam has made a bad decision. So we're in 1 Kings chapter 12 and 2 Chronicles chapter 10. And if you read them, I've got a program that I can open up Bibles. And I was able to put them side by side. And it's almost, there's some wording difference, but it's almost verbatim in this until you get down to the end of 1 Kings, and it gives us a little bit more history about Jeroboam. But we see the account here of what has transpired after Solomon had died. And now his son is in charge. Our lesson for today gives a valuable lesson on leadership. Jesus explained to the apostles that leadership within his kingdom was not to be patterned after the world. Many leaders of the world use coercion, intimidation, and force to get the people to do what they want. Do we see that even in today? Do we see it all through history? The rise and fall of countries, of corporations, of families. And you say, well, why is that one far greater than that one? Look at the leaders. To be great in his kingdom requires great service, and Jesus gave the supreme example of giving his life for ransom for many. God calls his servants to be leaders in his kingdom. It says last week's lesson ended with the Lord pronouncing judgment on Solomon because his heart had turned to idols. And think about not only turned to idols, what he had established. We talked about the groves he had built near the temple. He put all that effort and time in the temple, dedicated it, yet he turned in a short period of time and built idol worships near the temple so everyone could see this. The Lord told Solomon that the kingdom of Israel would be torn away from him, but not in his day. He would promise David that his son would reign over Israel, and he would keep the promise. But after Solomon's death, the Lord would tear away the kingdom of Israel from Solomon's son, Rehoboam. But not all the kingdom. For David's sake and for Jerusalem's sake, which the Lord chosen to be a city in which he built his temple, the Lord would preserve the tribe of Judah under Rehoboam's rulership. Notice how it said under Rehoboam's rulership. It didn't say leadership. It didn't say guidance, under his rulership. Thus began the divided kingdom period. Israel, the northern 10 tribes, and Judah, the southern tribe. Did the division of Israel occur because the Lord required it or because of the poor decisions of Rehoboam? Yes. And the writer brings us out about God's sovereignty. But yes, Rehoboam made bad choices. He sought counsel. He sought counsel again and made worse decisions. But in the end, God is sovereign. God is just. God had given out the warnings, not only to Solomon to pass on to his son, but to David, to Saul, to Israel itself, when they said, "We want a king like everyone else." And Samuel says, "Okay, but this is what God requires. And this is what you'll see from this kingdom." So they see this. And we look at David's life. He was a man after God's own heart. Did he not falter? Yes. Did he come back to God? Yes. Continually? Yes. But what was given to David also? The sword will not leave your house. Turmoil had started. Are we seeing it here now? Rehoboam made bad choices, bad decisions, followed bad guidance. But it's been established. God is both sovereign and omniscient. Thus, God knew the heart of Rehoboam and the choices he would make. God did not predetermine Rehoboam's choices. He knew them beforehand. God used the poor choices of Rehoboam made to bring about his sovereign will for Israel. Will God use our choices, our bad choices, good choices or bad choices to accomplish his will on earth? And we all said the pastor's favorite verse, Romans 8:28. Yes. Again, Samuel, we want a king like the other nations. This is what the king will do. This is what the king, 1 Samuel. Oh, look, it's open right here. 1 Samuel chapter 8, 11 through 18. The king's doing. This is what the king's going to do to you. I'm going to read a couple of these. And he said, Samuel said, and he said, "This will be the manner of the king that shall reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them for himself, his chariots and to his horsemen, and some shall run before his chariots." In verse 15, he will take 1/10 of your seed of your vineyard and give to his officers and his servants. Ooh, didn't we just read this last week? Verse 17, he will take 1/10 of your sheep, and ye shall be his servants. This is what the king's going to do. And they said, nevertheless, the people, in verse 19, nevertheless, the people refused to obey the voice of Samuel and said, "Nay, but we will have a king over us." It's set in place. We will have a king over us. This won't happen. We will be like other nations. Abraham is our father. This one, we're your chosen people. This won't happen to us. Rehoboam made a bad decision, did he not? So in our first part, Israel's request, 1 Kings chapter 12, 1 through 5. So let's get a little back history. We know through our readings, we've talked about different ones. We hear about Rehoboam, but what about Jeroboam? In Kings, 1 Kings chapter 11 gives us an insight on who Jeroboam was. In 1 Kings 11 and 26. And Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, the Ephraite of Zerah, Solomon's servant, whose mother's name was Zeruiah, a widow woman, even he lifted up his hand against the king. He was a servant of Solomon. Solomon seeing his strength, his ability to maybe influence people. Oh, he's to be a great leader. He put him in charge of collecting tribute for the 10 tribes. While he's out and about, guess what happens? He runs into a prophet, Ahijah, and tells him, you're going to be king of the 10 tribes of the northern, or the 10 tribes of Israel. And he rips up his new garment, gives him pieces. And when Solomon finds out about this, he says, that old man, he's always talking that way. What's Solomon's heart? To destroy him, because he already knows what's going to happen. His son's going to lose the kingdom. But this I can do something about. I'm the wisest man around. I'll destroy and kill Jeroboam and end this. Who's in control? God's in control. Jeroboam flees to where? Egypt. Who takes him in? I'm trying to remember his name now. The king, or the ruler of Egypt, which is who? Solomon's father-in-law. Takes him in with open arms. Oh, yeah, but wait a minute. That's my father-in-law. He's a good guy. Where's his heart? If I can get advance of him, this kingdom, the wealth that Israel has occurred through these 40 years, you darn root and toot, now I'm going to take charge of it. Come on in, Jeroboam. Welcome, welcome. He stays there until Solomon's death. He tells the Pharaoh, he says, I need to go back home. What? Have I not welcomed you here and gave you everything you need? Yes, you have, but I need to go back home. Jeroboam heads back home because he remembers what the prophet had told him. And the pride swells. I'm going to be king of this, and I'll show Rehoboam how to rule a kingdom. So in verse 1, chapter 12, Rehoboam went to Shechem, for all Israel were come to Shechem to make him king. Remember what it was told? You want a king? Here's the requirements for a king. It will be of your people. It won't be someone outside of your people. It'll be one that I appoint, but you will also back him, agree upon. You'll know him. So they come to Shechem. Here it is. Rehoboam's going to become Shechem to say, I'm king. And all the people say, yes, we want you as king. And it came to pass when Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, who was yet in Egypt, heard of it, for he had fled from the presence of King Solomon, Jeroboam dwelled in Egypt. They sent and called him, and Jeroboam and all the congregation of Israel came and spake unto Rehoboam, saying, Thy father made our yoke grievous. Now therefore make thou the grievous service of thy father, and the heavy yoke which put upon lighter, and we will serve thee. And he said unto them, Depart yet for 3 days, then come again to me. And the prophet and the people departed. So, man, this guy's pretty smart. Young guy said, let me consult this. Let me get back with you. But they said, lighten up the taxation that your father has placed on us. Why has his father placed on it? Where was his father's heart at the end? So he says, let me work on this. Israel's complaint should remind us of the Lord's warning in 1 Samuel 8, 11 through 18. And we touched on that. This is what you're going to get. But God would not hear them when they cry out. Are we at this point? Prior to the captivity, he would not hear him. This is going to happen. This is what you wanted. Oh, the misery we bring upon ourselves by disobeying the Lord. Solomon had no right to tax the people to support his own extravagant lifestyle, but he did he not? He taxed to build his house. It took longer than it took the temple. He taxed to fulfill the table, to feed the number of people he had, servants. He taxed to build, remember how many wives? Close to 1,000 wives. To build places for them. The people seeing this continually. Why am I struggling here while he's living lavishly there? I always think on this when I see reports of North Korea. The Lord did not intervene for the people because they had long ago rejected him as king. 1 Samuel 8 and 7. Samuel, they're not rejecting you, they're rejecting me. And in doing so, he would not hear them. The occasion of our text is the coronation of Rehoboam, Solomon's son. Shechem was a historic city located in the tribe of Ephraim. It was very special to Ephraimites because Joseph's bones were buried there. Joshua 24 and 32. But before they agreed to support King Rehoboam, they had a request. We're here to agree upon and appoint you king. But we have a request. Collecting taxes, the mention of Jeroboam in 1 Kings 11, Solomon had once made him ruler of all the charge of the house of Joseph. These 10 tribes in that area, he was ruler, collecting. And as he's collecting, he's hearing, why are we paying so much? You know, if you are a leader, you've got the king's ear. Can you do something? What happens? He starts to think and listen. Collecting the taxes of the northern tribes, he runs into Ahijah. And he tells them the prophecy. Solomon gets word of it, and he wants to kill him. So he flees. The request was simple. Lighten the load of your father. Rehoboam did a wise thing by asking for 3 days to consider the request. But would he be a wise in his decision? What would he do during those 3 days in preparations for the decision? We can think back of examples, guidance that we may use today. We can think back in that 120 years when Israel was growing and prospering and becoming the eye of the world. See the decision Saul made. See David after God's own heart. In this time of decision, what did David do? We see what Saul had done and what brought him. We see what David had done and what brought him. What about Solomon, the wisest man? Did he consult God? Did he go to prayer? What did he do? In our next part 2, said, Rehoboam sought advice. And King Rehoboam consulted with the old man that stood before Solomon his father while he yet lived, and said, how do ye advise that I may answer this people? Okay. Smart move, Rehoboam. There's people that have experience. There's people out there that have been with the leader. They've been with our king. You may have been a son and seen aspect of it. We worked with your father. This is what we see. You ask us, this is what we tell you. And they spake unto him, saying, if thou wilt be a servant unto this people this day, and will serve them and answer them and speak good words to them, then will be thy servant forever. He said, look, be their servant. Be a leader that they can look up to. Be the one that they want to follow. Did your father tax them? Yes, he did. We've seen things that your father chose to do, and we advised him, but he still did it. Don't do like your father. And if you lighten this up, these people will follow you wherever you want to go. Be that leader. Verse 8, but he forsook the counsel of the old men, which they had given him, and consulted with the young men that were grown up with him, and stood before him. Wait a minute. Yeah, you're with my father, but times have changed. It's different now. Let me get a contemporary idea, a contemporary view. Those that are in line with me. And he said unto them, what counsel give ye that we may answer? See how he said when he asked the older men, the wise men, that I may give an answer to these people. But now he has a younger one. Tell me something that we all can benefit ourselves with, that we may answer this people who have spoken to me, saying, make the yoke which thy father did put upon us lighter. And the young men that were grown up with him spake unto them, saying, thou shalt speak unto thy people that spake unto thee, saying, thy father made your yoke heavy, but make thou it lighter unto us. Thus shalt thou say unto them, my little finger shall be thicker than my father's loins. And now whereas my father did lay you with heavy yoke, I will add to your yoke. My father had chastened you with whips, but I will chasten you with scorpions. He said, look, don't back down. This is what they're just trying you. You're the new king. They're going to do this. But you go out and you put your fist down and let them know who's in charge. You say, my father was hard. You ain't seen nothing yet. In verse 11, he says, my father chased you with whips, but I will chastise you with scorpions. This is referring to, think to the time in the New Testament when our Lord and Savior was scourged and whipped with a cat of nine tails. This is comparison to that. Those whips with bones and rocks and hard things in it. He says, a whip, yeah, it hurts. You're really going to see what a whip does. This is what he means, chastise with scorpions. The whip's going to be harder. Now, the young ones then say, and they'll follow you wherever you want to go. The old one says, be their leader, be their servant, and they'll follow you wherever you go. The young one said, put your fist down and make them follow you. Which choice do I take? And all these, first, he did what? The old men. I'm going to rephrase it. The wise men. Then he went to the young men. Who's he leaving out? God. Did he seek the Lord? He says, okay, I've got this wisdom, and I've got this so-called wisdom. Lord, what would you have me to do? Think about David's life. And many times when he had at the point to where he could destroy Saul, and he's got leaders, he's got his army, and kill him, we've got him, everyone, destroy him. He said, no, that's God's anointed. That's God's man. I am not going to step in there. So Rehoboam sought the advice of the elders, which was a wise move, verse 6 and 7. They advised Rehoboam to be a servant of the people, which in turn would encourage the people to serve him. Rehoboam should have become a servant king, not a dictator king. Moses and David received their early training as shepherds. They learned to be servants of sheep before they became leaders of people. You say, Well, so you got to be a farmer, you got to be a shepherd in order to be a great leader. No, but it shows you're leading something that has no clue what to do. Be that leader to show them. As them sheep will wander off. You bring them back, they wander off. They fall in a hole, they wander off. They continue. How many times you got to learn? Well, what was Rehoboam's life like? Well, we see by what Solomon's life was in the household, in the things of luxury. Did Rehoboam not partake of this also? And think, well, my dad was the wisest one. I've got to be, hereditary. I'm probably pretty close to that. But yet, he had no way to lead. We used to, in scouts, we would teach the young ones. They always change position in scouts so they learn to lead. Because they could sit on the outside and see a scout that may be a thumb pusher. You're going to do this. I'm in charge now. And eventually, that young scout would be in charge also. So are you going to lead that way, or are you going to lead this way? And we'd show examples. You take just a simple piece of string. Say, what's the best way to move this string? From the front, right? You pull it. And what does the rest of the string do? It follows. But if you're a pusher on the back, what happens to that string? It bunches all up, does it not? To give them an example, to see what it takes to lead. The old men said, be out front. Show compassion. Be a servant unto them, and they'll follow you wherever you want to go. Rehoboam rejected the advice of the elders. Seemingly, he was not looking for advice from someone to tell him what he wanted to hear. He knew from the get-go. You ever have that running that person? They come, hey, I got a question for you. Should I do this or should I do that? And you say, well, it would be smart if you did this here. Okay, then he goes back and he does the opposite. It's like, one time it happens, all right. But when it comes continually and they keep asking you, you think, why do you even come ask me? Because you're going to do the opposite. Not that my idea is right, but you just want to hear something that you want to do. Rehoboam was here. Rehoboam called his friends. They told him to make the burden upon the people even harder. Then surely they should follow you. Let me see if I can find this real quick. Proverbs 17. 17 and 14. This is, surely put your fist down and they'll follow you. Proverbs 17 and verse 14. The beginning of strife is as when one letteth out water thereof, leaves off contention before it meddled with. The beginning of strife is when one letteth out water. If you have a small stream and you board it up and it builds and builds and builds and builds, then I'm just going to let a little bit of this water out. What happens? You can't stop it. Just put some more power into them. They'll surely follow you. And that force comes behind them. But notice the advice that Rehoboam did not seek. He didn't seek the Lord's, did he? Solomon wrote, there are many devices in a man's heart. Nevertheless, the counsel of the Lord that shall stand. Proverbs 19:21. I love what the writer said. The Rehoboam must have been asleep during this lesson. And you see Proverbs, how it was written to his son. And you say, man, he had this here. If he just would have read through it. Just to spur to think on something. But where was Rehoboam? When was Proverbs written? We don't know. But was Rehoboam at the point where, that's not me. That's not for me. Did the guidance or did the teaching early on forego from his father to where it's established in his heart now? I don't need that. Look at all this wealth I have. Look how long this will carry me into my life. I'll be the king one day. I don't need that. So he may have been sleeping. Rehoboam did evil because he prepared not his heart to seek the Lord. 2 Chronicles 12 and 14. He did evil because he did not prepare his heart. Where was his heart prepared at in those early ages of Solomon? When it was established to go forth, to start things rolling. So our last part 3, the division of Israel. So when all Israel saw that the king hearkened not unto them, the people answered the king, saying, What portion have we in David? Neither have we inheritance with the son of Jesse. To your tents, O Israel. Now see to thine own house, David. So Israel departed unto their tents. But as for the children of Israel, which dwelt in the cities of Judah, Rehoboam reigned over them. So he tells them, no, he says, this is what's going to happen. And he's thinking, they'll say, okay, all right, well, let's renegotiate. Wait a minute, give us a couple of days to decide this. They knew right off the get-go. What do we have with your portion of David, son of Jesse? When you study this, that term, says, what do we have with David? Neither have we inheritance with the son of Jesse. This is kind of a slang or slam at the house of Judah. When Saul had said, who is Jesse? Who is this individual that's King David that you say there is? The animosity is built over the years that's here. And it says, go. See what you're going to do now, David. You need us. Not realizing who is around him. All of Israel. Remember the king that took in Jeroboam? What's happening here? What about the kings to the north or the kings to the east? They're all watching this. Israel's dividing, and they think, we'll be fine by ourselves. Everyone is fearful of Israel. Yet, they're divided now. Where is their strength? Then King Rehoboam sent Adoram, who was over the tribute, and all Israel stoned him with stones, that he died. So he says, okay, you going to be that way? You, taxpayer, go collect the tribute and whatever else you can get. Israel said, Uprising. They stoned and killed him. Therefore, King Rehoboam made speed to get into a chariot to flee to Jerusalem. So Israel rebelled against the house of David unto this day. And it came to pass, when all Israel heard that Jeroboam was come again, that they sent and called unto him unto the congregation, and made him king over all Israel. There was none that followed the house of David, but the tribe of Judah only. You can have a king, but if you're going to have a king, let it be this way. Only of your people. But first and foremost, I will set him there, God said. So what do we see here? Remember Jeroboam? He was on our side. Remember how he had the ear to us. He listened to our plight. Let's get him. Yes, surely he'll be our leader. Not surprisingly, Israel divided when the northern tribes heard Rehoboam's harsh response to the request. Oh, if Rehoboam had said, okay, let's work together on this. Yes, my father did these things. It may not be easy, but I think we can work this out. Let us work together so we can stand fast as a great nation for the kingdoms around us. Judah and Benjamin remained loyal to the king Rehoboam in verse 17 and 21. As goes the leader, so goes the people. As goes the leader. We start to see Jeroboam. As goes that leader. But Judah did evil in the sight of the Lord during Rehoboam's reign and went after idolatry. What did Rehoboam's father set up? What are still there? Where is Rehoboam following? As goes the leader, so goes the people. The words of the people in verse 16 is reminiscent of the days of King David when he rebelled, when the rebel Sheba said something similar in 2 Samuel 2:20. There had been a growing division in the nation of Israel for centuries. This had been building. And they always had this in the background. Remember, we always talk about the history of Israel, how they hold on to certain things. Even in the New Testament, when Christ speaks to the Pharisees, he says, but we have Abraham as our father. They hold on to these things. 2 Samuel 20:1, when David has become king, there's still that remnant that has animosity to him. When there's an uprising and Absalom tries to overthrow his kingdom, many of the 10 tribes went with Absalom. But when it was squashed, they're still saying, well, wait a minute. Why should we follow you? And this was given in the same thing. What do we have with you, son of Jesse? What inheritance do we have? That fear is there. What do we have? But Rehoboam did not help the matters at all. Seemingly in an effort to force the matter, he sent Adoram, who was over the tribe, to collect it from the deserting tribes. And Israel stoned him. You want to break away? That's fine. I'm still king, and you're still going to pay. But the payment had turned in the death of this man. We might make the case that the kingdom was once again united after captivity period in the days of Ezra and Nehemiah, but never like the days of David and Solomon. These 10 tribes have split. It's been brewing. The decisions of this young king for not seeking after God could have eliminated this, could have ended this. Yet did what? Set the division in order. What these leaders do, who will follow? And the last part said in the application, leaders can be no better than the people they are on the inside. Rehoboam had a bad heart because he did not seek the Lord. 2 Chronicles 12:14. Choices come from the heart, and the good and bad choices because of the heart was not right with God. In Matthew 15, and starting in verse 16, and the Lord said, and Jesus said, ye are also without understanding? Do you not yet understand that whatsoever entereth into the mouth goeth into the belly, and is cast out and draweth? But these things that proceed out of the mouth come forth from the heart, and they defile the man. From out of the heart proceedeth evil thoughts, murderers, adulterers, fornication, thefts, false witnesses, and blasphemy. These are the things which defile a man. But to eat, which is unwashed hands, defileth not a man. Christ says, where did it come from? It's from the heart. This is where Rehoboam's heart was, against the Lord. As Jesus told us, greatness comes from the great service. The best leaders are those who learn to serve those they lead. Why does Jesus have so many followers in the world today? Because he was bossy, or because he sacrificed all for his followers. I've often defined a good leader as one who is willing to go first. We must be willing to serve first before we can ever lead others. We have to decide to serve first. As a child of God, when we accept Christ as our Savior and say, okay, that's it. What position do I have, and who can I be in charge of? I said, no. We are first to serve, are we not? The great example that we have, what Christ served for us. I didn't come to seek and save what was lost. He said, I came to seek and save what was lost. I didn't came to usurp authority, to be put in position, this is what you'll do and this is what you'll do. I come to love and show mercy. Obedience. Just as we've seen in the life of David and the onset life of his Rehoboam's father, but as his heart faltered. Again, we talked many times. Did David's heart stay the same all through his life? No. But when it faltered, where did he go? Back to the Lord. Rehoboam, at this point, he never sought the Lord. But had he, things might have been different. So next week's lesson, as we start this divided kingdom now, a contrast of worship, idolatry. We're going to see this as it starts. What is set up. What has started to let people away. What that leader is doing, the people will follow. Not all the time. Majority of the time. Right there. Any questions, any comments on this? So if you have the opportunity, go ahead and read again down through this, the daily reading that we have, and get further insight on it there. Lord, as we come today through this lesson at the start of the divided kingdom, Lord, we realize that you are sovereign, Lord, that your will be done. We know you give us a free will to make decisions, Lord, but pray, Lord, that we can always have that heart and the desire to seek you first, Lord, in the direction we have. And stand on those directions you'd have for us. Many times we may say, but that's not the desire I have, Lord, but it's your will. Or the world might say, don't do that because that's not the social norm of today. But we pray, Lord, that your will be done. Give us the knowledge and the wisdom to discern these things, Lord, to see these that would bring honor and glory to you, Lord, that would be beneficial for the furtherance of the gospel, not in our life, not in the comfort that we desire in our life, Lord, but to bring honor and glory unto you. Thank you for this lesson, Lord, in the teaching here, the decisions that we have to make, Lord, that not only affects us, Lord, but all those around us. We just ask you to continue to be with us throughout this day. Be with the pastor who brings forth your word, Lord. Continue to be with those sick amongst our numbers. We ask these things in your name. Amen.